what? I found out good news that you're going to want to know today. I'm pretty excited about it. Did you know that the credit card companies are here to protect you and make your life awesome? Did you know that? I just found that out this week because you can trust what you see in the media. And this is what they have to say. Actually, you got to go back one to go to it. But I just saw this commercial. I was like,
Hi.
No! Use your Capital One no-hassle card.
Protect yourself with Capital One's low rates and great rewards.
I'm so there for you. What's in your wallet?
hey, aren't you glad that they're here to protect you? I'm so glad. I mean, I know that this hasn't really worked for me in my own life, but evidently the credit card companies are here to protect you and to help you, and they want to know what's in your wallet. And they want to know what's in your wallet because they want to charge you interest on that. And debt is a crazy, crazy thing in our country. Does anybody know approximately what the debt is, the national debt? Yeah, it's like a crud load. I think that's like the official term. It's enormous. How much do you think the average person has, average family, in credit card debt? Average family in America when you average everybody? 10 grand. 10 grand is the average on credit card debt. Now, on top of that, you have people who have debt for school loans. Can you relate to any of that? People have automobile loans, and they got that debt. If you own a home in Santa Cruz, you know, anywhere else, you're a billionaire. But Americans are in debt, right? Debt is a big, big, big issue for us. And most of you right now probably have something riding on a card or cards. You may be doing the deal where you like use one card to pay the other card. Do you ever do that kind of thing? You know, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I can never pay it off. And so many of us get to places in our life where we have debts that we cannot pay. It is simply too big. There's not going to be enough money against the interest charges, and it becomes a real issue for people. You know, now have you ever been in a situation where you had credit debt and you paid it off? Have you ever had that? It's getting very quiet in here. Have you ever had a situation where you had like a big credit card and you finally paid it off? You got smart somehow and you got it paid off. Man, that is the greatest feeling in the world. And then you know what you do? You use your credit card to go celebrate. Every single time. Every single time. I'm a pastor. I know these things. Not because I've ever done these things, but because other people have. Now, here's what I want you to know about debt. As we talk about what's new today, we're going to talk about this new agreement that God has with people, and it's related to our debt. And it's interesting to think that when you think about what the Bible calls sin, which is, it means literally to miss the mark, to miss the center of the, like if you're shooting an arrow at a target, it's to miss the mark. The Bible talks about sin as being like debts that pile up over a lifetime. In fact, Jesus, in one of his most famous prayers, you know, where he says, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive those who are indebted to us. That the word that Jesus actually used there was the Greek word that is really translated not trespass, it's translated debt. It's something that we owe to somebody else. It's like our debt to goodness, to perfection, to rightness. And Jesus says, here's the way to pray. Ask God to forgive your debts. And the idea of debt in the Scripture is that we continually, over and over, find ourselves making the wrong choices. It can happen in what you say. In the last week, have you said anything that you kind of probably shouldn't have said or you regret? Or have you thought anything that you probably shouldn't have thought? Have you reacted wrongly to somebody? Have you been selfish? Just in the last week, right? Because if you don't think you have, if we had a special camera that could view everything that you said, thought, your inclination, even Andrea, and Andrea is nearly perfect, right? If we were to record all that, I guarantee you she would not want you to see the whole of her thoughts and her words and her deeds. And think about a lifetime of that. Think about a lifetime of everything you've ever done. Remember when you just got out of the cradle and you had a little brother and you walk up to him because you're just starting to walk and you go, bang! Why? Because he was home. You know, I mean, I don't know. We make, we are indebted to God. We consistently break the rules. We consistently break the law. We live wrongly. Now, some people live worse than others, okay? So you can go, hey, some people do better, some people do a little worse. But the issue is we all layer up sin in our life to the point of debt that we could never pay off. It's more than the national debt. We can never, ever, ever pay off this debt. Now, Jesus, at his very last dinner, I'm not going to call it the Last Supper because that immediately puts people into this religious mindset, but the last time that he chowed down with his buddies that they call the Last Supper, he began to talk about a new deal, a new covenant, a new agreement that had to do with the paying off of all of the cosmic debt of everyone on the planet who would receive his payment. Let's pray. God, thanks that you love us so much that you'd pay the debt that we couldn't pay at your total expense, beyond what we can imagine. And so this morning, Lord, as we begin to open your word and try to figure out what this new deal, this new covenant, this new agreement is, Lord, would you speak to us about our attempts to pay our own way off, and would you speak to us about where we're at with receiving your payment for all of the inclinations and words and deeds of our past and our future. Thank you for loving us enough to come, Jesus. Amen. If you have a Bible, you can open to Luke 22. That's our passage for today is 22. We're starting at verse 19. And at this last dinner, Jesus is with his buddies, and they're sitting around the table, and they've already eaten, and a couple of people have kind of burped, and they're kind of laying around, just kind of, maybe they have Thanksgiving tummy. They're all like, oh, I feel kind of sleepy, And as all this is going on, Jesus takes some bread and a cup of wine, and he begins to talk about this new covenant. And he says it this way: he took bread and he gave thanks and he broke it and he gave it to them, to each one of them. And he said this to them. He goes, this bread is my body, represents my body, given for you. Then he says, do this in remembrance of me. Continue to do this, what I'm doing right now, to remember me. Verse 20 says, in the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, and that's a glass of wine, saying, this cup is the new covenant, that's the new thing, in my blood, which is poured out for you. So Jesus starts to talk about this thing that he calls the new covenant. And we don't think a lot about covenants these days. We don't use that term much. We might think about an agreement, right? Like when you get a new credit card, right, you sign something, you make an agreement, a contract with the credit card company that you will pay your debt or you will pay the interest at a certain amount, right? It's an agreement. A wedding, when you get married, is another type of a covenant where two people come together. They make, some of you have done that fairly recently. You've made promises to each other, right? You've made an agreement. Jesus says there's all kinds of agreements in the world, but I'm bringing to you a new one, a new covenant, a different one, a better one, an agreement that is based on what I'm doing right now, is the sacrifice of my body and my blood given for you. So it's a funny thing that these covenants or these agreements in the Bible, they were pretty common because the way that they did business dealings is they would cut a covenant. Now the word cut a covenant, literally what they would do in Old Testament times is they would sacrifice an animal because covenants were instituted by blood and they were sealed by blood. Now you may go, oh, that's gross, unless it's a cat, or whatever. You might go, oh, we shouldn't harm little animals unless it's a cat or whatever it is. But here's the deal. In those days, we can't really judge 4,000 years ago. We can't really stand in judgment on them. But the way they did things was they instituted and they sealed a deal by sacrificing an animal. And they were saying, if I break the deal, let this happen to me. Let my blood be spilled out. It's a binding and agreement, right? That's a covenant. In fact, you'll find it through the scriptures, if you're a note taker, in Genesis chapter 15, Abraham, the founder of the Israelites, right, the father of them, there was a covenant, Genesis chapter 15, and you'll see blood spilled. Moses goes up on the mountain, he comes back down from the mountain, he's talking to the Israelites who are now a nation, and he goes, I'm making a covenant with you. God says a covenant with you, and he takes blood and he starts to spatter it on him. Isn't that just a weird church service? I mean, we do weird stuff, but if I came in here and I just started throwing blood on you guys next week, it'd be quiet in here. It'd just be like me and Miguel would be cleaning the place out, right? But in those days, what they understood that covenant had to do with blood, sealed in blood. And so this covenant is a new agreement. And Jesus goes on to say, this is my body given for you. As he broke the bread and he started what? This ritual that we call communion, which we're going to celebrate later this morning. He goes, this is my body given for you. So this new agreement, this new covenant that Jesus was setting up had to do with him coming in a physical body. The Bible teaches that Jesus is fully God. He comes down from heaven. He takes on an earth suit, right? He becomes a human being. He takes on a body only to live a short time. Who here is less than 33 years old? Man. Who here is more than 33? It's okay. Any of us can agree to that, right? Oh, yeah, no, I'm over 33. I'm over 33. Some of you twice, right? But here's the deal. He's saying, look, I'm going to come down to earth. I'm only going to live a short time in this body, and at about 33 years, they're going to kill me. But it's funny because he goes, this is my body given for you. He says he's coming and he's bringing himself. His self as a gift that he's going to give. This new covenant, this new agreement is based on him giving up his whole self. If you give up your body and your blood, that's pretty much all you got to give, right? He says, I have come that I would give away myself. I'd come to the earth, give away my body. I mean, what kind of an agreement is this, man? That God goes, your debt is so high, even if you're the best person that ever has been, that the only cure for it, you can never pay for it, so I've got to come down and pay for it, and it's going to cost me. I'm going to come down in the flesh. This is my body, he says. Remember me with this bread. Remember my body, that I came for real, live and in person, for one reason, to create a new deal, a new agreement, and it's given for you. Man, it blows me away that God's whole desire, evidently, for his glory and everything else, is to try to live and then die to pay off my enormous national cosmic debt. I mean, what kind of God is this? How do you see God? Do you see God as being kind of an angry guy or an old guy? Do you see him as a rule giver? Or do you see him this way, as a guy who comes in a body and says, this is who I am, my whole body. I came here to give myself up for you. Then he goes on and he talks a little bit more about this new covenant or agreement or contract. He says, this new agreement is paid for in my blood. Because how were covenants started? In blood. How were they sealed? In blood. And again he says, look, this new covenant, this new agreement that I have is not about you trying to do stuff. It's about me coming here for you because I'm that kind of God. That I would give up myself. I've come in a body to give up myself, and literally you can pour out my blood to pay for all the sins of all the debt of everyone in the world who will receive my payment. This is a totally new way of thinking about God. Up to that point, this is what they knew. There were 10 commandments and then a book full of other things that you had to do to try to, in a sense, kind of pay down maybe some of the interest on your debt. Like, it's a rough analogy, but it's almost like there were things that you tried to do to pay down your debt yourself by following these rules. And that agreement did everything to point to the fact that it just didn't work very well. That a new and better agreement, a better covenant had to come. And Jesus says, here's the new agreement. It's all on me. I take all of your debt. I put it into my giant backpack. Every sin, every wrong thought, every inclination, everybody you wanted to beat up, or every little thing that you took that wasn't yours, that paper clip from work, or redoing your books to rip off the tax man, or downloading a bunch of music that's not yours. And Let's go quiet again. You know what I mean? Every single thing. Have you ever not said something to somebody but got in your car, and then in your car you're like, you know what I should have said? I should have said, and then you say all the things that you may or may not say out loud. But that's the intention of our heart. Like, even if you're Mother Teresa, and she was awesome, right? You know how she saw herself? As a person so indebted she could never pay it off. With all of her goodness, she couldn't pay it off. She looked to Jesus because she said, man, God came from heaven, came down to earth. He let himself be broken. He poured out his blood, and he did it for me because he loves me that much. And he recognizes the situation I'm in. He recognizes that the situation I'm in is one that I can't deal with on my own. So it was paid for, he says, this new agreement. My blood is going to be poured out for this agreement. Now here's something that's really interesting. This happened at the last dinner, right? Now the last dinner happened the night before Jesus went to die on the cross. So well within 24 hours that Jesus had said, hey, do this and remember me. I'm going to give up my body for you. I'm going to give up my blood for this new agreement for you. Less than 24 hours later, just a few hours later, Jesus went to the cross. And he had hung on the cross for 6 hours at this point. And his friend John writes this in his gospel in John chapter 19. Jesus says, it says that when Jesus was up on the cross, somebody took a sponge and they filled it up with wine that had this kind of, I don't know, some kind of ether in it that would allow you to not feel pain. It would make you stupefied. And Jesus, was like, I don't want to take it. And then they gave him another one later that was just some water or something and brought it up to him. And after that, it says, Jesus said, it is finished. Now, Jesus did not speak English. You do know that, right? He didn't speak English. Jesus didn't go, it is finished. And he didn't say, thou hast finished it. It has been completed. He also didn't speak Old English. He spoke Aramaic, right? That was their local kind of custom. That was where the language that they spoke was Aramaic and Hebrew. And Jesus probably said this in Aramaic, and what he said was this word, tetelestai. He's hanging there, and he says, it is finished. He says, tetelestai. And he didn't probably say it quietly, right? He probably said it loudly. So he yells out, tetelestai, and it means it is finished. And it says, then he gave up his spirit. Literally, Jesus let go of his life. They didn't kill him. Jesus let go of his life. And he goes, he gave up his life at that point, his body and his blood, ratified with his blood this new covenant. Now, here's why tetelestai is important. It means paid in full. It means debt-free. What he was doing was Jesus was paying and ratifying this new agreement by taking on the sins of the whole world, and they had all been paid in full because of his perfect life, sinless death. He had the ability, he was the only one morally pure enough to take and pay off the debt of perfection. Only one. It's funny, this word tetelestai, when you look at old ancient documents from that time, you can find business dealings from those times that had that word stamped on as a receipt. It means literally it's paid in full. No more debt. What was Jesus doing, man? He comes from heaven, he gives up his body, pours out his blood to start this new agreement in his blood, and he yells out at the end of it, he goes, it's finished, paid in full. Let me see your hand, Ken. It says paid in full. Karen, let me see your hand. He says paid in full, so you don't have to, Lexi. Paid in full. Jesus' whole method of living was about giving himself away, the wholeness of himself, to remove all the debt of anyone who would receive it. And just as I went to Ken and said, hey, Ken, let me see your hand, if he would have said, no way, man, I don't trust you, Chuck. I don't know what you're going to do, because anything could happen, which would have been probably a wiser choice this morning. Some people just go, no way. I don't want your payment. Jesus says, receive my payment because you can't pay it yourself. Now, here's the problem with the whole program. The problem with the program is both people who are not believers in Jesus try to pay it off themselves. And people who are believers in Jesus, even after they trust him, because he went to the cross for them, they try to pay some off themselves too. And it doesn't work. And the way that we do this is by good works and guilty feelings in our guts. We think, man, I know that I haven't always done things right. I'm going to turn over a new leaf. You ever do that? New year, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. Or something bad happens to you. Let's say you get arrested or you lose a relationship you have and you think, I'm going to turn over a new leaf. You know what happens when you turn over a leaf? You just see the ugly, veiny side of the same leaf, man. So we only have so much goodness in us, and we have this enormous debt, right? Beyond what anybody can ever pay back on their own. Even if they're a really excellent human, even if you're Mother Teresa. We've got this massive debt, and we think, hang on, I got to try to balance this out by turning over a new leaf. I'm going to try to behave better. I'm going to stop doing X, Y, Z, bad things. So we stop doing the things that we know are bad or negative or corrosive, or we start to try to intentionally do good deeds. We go to church. We believe that there is a God. We might sing. We might give money. We might help elderly people across the street. We might do whatever it is that we think would be a good thing to do. And the thing is all those little payments, they don't touch the debt. Do you know anybody, and maybe it's you, who've had such a big credit card debt that you knew there was no way it could ever be paid in your lifetime? Take that and times it times infinity times 2, right? Double infinity. Infinity. And when you begin to measure your life, how are you going to balance that out? You can't. You know how I know? It's because I know that God in His wisdom and His love said, man, the only way to pay off this kind of debt, not just for our past sins, but for our future ones too, all of our debt, is for me to come personally, to come in the flesh, to lose my life, to pay the payment. And how is it paid? It's paid in full. There's nothing left to pay. But for many of us, whether we're Christian or not, we try to pay by doing good things or stopping the bad things, turning over a new leaf, but it's never going to pay off. We have insufficient funds. We just do not have the cash. So then here's what we do. We feel bad. We feel bad. And some of us probably haven't even recognized that our feeling guilty and feeling bad about ourselves and saying, well, I'm just not really that good a person. God could never love me. I shouldn't go to church. I feel like a hypocrite. Some of us don't recognize it, but by doing that, it's like we're trying to somehow pay our own way by our own self-punishment. But Jesus paid in full to Telestai. It's all paid, including your future. Because remember, every sin that you have done every debt you have in sin, all the way to your birth, you recognize that was all in the future for Jesus then, right? Okay, so that means all the ones that you do from this point out, those are also in the future. He didn't pay for the past sins. Every sin that we commit, every debt we have, it's a future debt to Jesus. He paid it full. And we want to feel bad and go, man, I just feel so bad about my behavior, my thoughts, or that I haven't been doing what I should be doing, and I feel guilty, and it makes me want to pull back from God. It is really not what it is it's not receiving His full payment. Here's what we do when we blow it. He says, God, Father, forgive us our debts, and I'm going to forgive those who have a debt against me. That's it. And then you recognize what Jesus has already done, and you walk away without guilt and without burden. Because all that guilt and burden does is it separates us from God. Why did He come? Why did He die? Why did He come to the cross? Man, dude, so that we could have a relationship with Him. And He pays it all in full, and we go, oh man, I need to, I just really feel bad. And so I start backing away from Jesus and His people and the Bible and worship, community and church, because I feel like such a bad person. Man, it doesn't work. You can't pay your own sins off. And even after you're a believer, a follower in Jesus, and His payment is stamped upon you personally, you can't go back and go, I need to somehow pay. Think about this. Think about this for a minute. They're going to pass out pennies because we're the only church in America right now giving you money. And this tells you about how much money we have to give you. But a penny is perfect. because a penny is, I don't know, what can you buy with a penny? Is there anything left, really? Seriously, are there like coin machines? You got a penny from a bank? You can buy a penny from a bank? Dude, I'm doing that today. I'm going to go to the bank and I'm going to go, I'd like to exchange this for a penny. It'd be perfect. It'll be like, oh, it's harvest season in Santa Cruz again, you know? Everybody take a look at this penny. The only thing you buy with a penny, according to Mark, is another penny. Now imagine with me, if you will, a person you've never met before cares so much about you that they recognize that you have a debt of, let's say, $1.3 million in all of your debts. You have a debt of $1.3 million. And they just, though you don't know them, they love you, and they feel compassion on the fact that you are never going to pay off $1.3 million in debt. You can't even pay off interest charges on it. It's too big. But this person comes up to you and I, and they say, you know, I care about you. If you will give me the information, if you will allow me to, I will pay off every bit of debt. A whole new, would that be a new deal for you? Whoa, new deal, totally new deal, no debt. Celebrate, get the credit card, right? So this person, it's funny, man, because sometimes you say stuff and you realize how stinking true it is. Every now and then I go, that is so true. So this person comes and they pay all of your debt, everything you have, $1.3 million, a new deal, it doesn't cost you anything. But then you come along afterwards. In fact, here's the deal. They send their son. They send their son to bring the payment, and on the way, the son is killed. The son is killed for paying your payment. They paid it more than you could ever pay off out of their love for you. And then you went up to them and you said, man, I'm really thankful for what you did. I'm so sorry about your kid. Let me help. Let me give you a penny. There you go. I want to help you out. How does that work? Take your penny. Take a look at your penny. Imagine how it would feel if you had paid off all the debt that somebody couldn't pay. It cost you your child, and then all they could do is say, I know I need to do better. I need to try harder. Let me try to pay off some of it. I know I just feel so bad. I should just try to feel guilty and pay back my debt out of my sadness or separation from you. It would just be crazy. It would be nuts. And this is exactly the way people who don't understand the new contract with God behave. They try to pay off the enormous debt, piles with pennies on their own, and God says, it won't help. It's not enough. It's insufficient funds. I've paid it all. Will you simply accept it as a gift? And I feel so bad. I'm just, I should do better, and I should go to church more, and I should pray more, and all these things. I shouldn't be so mean to my friend or my spouse or my children. I feel so bad that I somehow, just this way I'm going to deal with my debt of sin. I'm just going to back away from. It's really like trying to pay God a penny back. And it's all been paid. Everything we ever do wrong and everything we've ever done wrong has all been future to Him. And He said it's all paid in full. And we can't earn God's love with a penny, and that's all we got to give, right? We can't earn God's favor with a penny. I'm going to try to do better so God will help me out of this mess, and we can't buy His forgiveness with a penny. It's already been paid off, and to offer it, it's just inconsequential, I used to say, I think it's insulting. It must be so insulting to God. I mean, maybe it really is. I don't know, because I'm not God, and we haven't talked about that personally. But I know one thing, it's insufficient funds. And that's the way so many of us live our lives, is just trying to feel bad as a Christian. If you feel bad all the time instead of simply going, Jesus, thank you that you paid everything, including this latest mistake. Including my favorite mistake, to quote Sheryl Crow, the one that we do over and over and over. Jesus died to pay for that. And us beating ourselves up doesn't add a penny to His goodness. Us trying to just do good stuff doesn't. It's great, when we make a mistake, we go and we ask for forgiveness, and then we go out with joy knowing it's already been paid in full. And we thank Him for it, right? It's a wonderful thing to know that when we do something good and we attend church or we go and help the poor, then when you do something like that, that's just the natural outcropping of people who recognize who Jesus is, and they dig what He did, so they try to live like Him. That's awesome. But you can't buy it. All our efforts cannot buy it. So what kind of God is this? It's an amazing God who comes and gives His whole self up 100% for us by giving His whole self and pouring out His blood in this new deal. And I think there's 3 ways that we can respond to these words this morning. I think the first one is asking ourselves the question, am I a person who has placed my trust in Jesus' debt payment? Have I ever come to a place in my life where I understand Jesus came, that He died. He died not because He was misunderstood. He didn't come to be just a good teacher, but He came intentionally to be the debt payment for everything in my life so that I am now set free from the penalties of death. Have I come to a place in my life where I understood that and where I recognize, Jesus, not only did you come to pay my debt, but you came to prove you were God. And the way that He proved that was 3 days later, He rose from the grave. After He said, it is finished, a clock started. And 3 days later, Jesus returned from the grave, proving everything that He said. And that's why there's this little church in a nightclub right now. And that's why there's a church down the street and it has a big cross on the top. It remembers this new deal in His blood. The reason that we're here is because this guy Jesus, you can't keep Him down. You can't keep Him in the grave. Why did He come? To pay our payment and to show Himself as the God who loves us. So the first way to respond is to ask the question to yourself, have I come to a place in my own life where I understood this, and this morning may be the first time, and Jesus says, put out your hand. Put out your hand. And He says, when you put out your hand, do you recognize you've got nothing in it? There's nothing here. There's nothing for you to pay. And then He says, will you receive my payment in full? And the way that He accomplished that by going to the cross and hanging up for us, that His blood would ratify this new covenant. So it's not just recognizing that Jesus lived. It's not just saying, I'm sorry for wrong. It's saying, Jesus, I recognize that when you rose again, that your hand showed the scar of being here alive, but that you also could raise your hand because you were alive. It means you're God, and I will follow you. You've paid all my debts. You must love me. I don't understand it all, but I will follow you. First response this morning is, if you haven't come to that place in your life, I would encourage you today. If you came with somebody who's a follower of Jesus, ask them. Say, hey, will you pray for me? Or I want to understand what it means to receive Jesus' forgiveness and to recognize Him as my God, to let Him stamp me for eternity and give me life. If you don't know anybody here, if you just kind of wandered in the door, well, I'm Chuck, you know me, and you can talk to me after the service. I'll be glad to talk to you. Jeremy leads our band. You can talk to him, or Andrea, the little redheaded girl who's back by the Info Central. You can talk to her. You've probably seen her around. So if you haven't found that place in your life where you've received His payment, it's not yours till you receive it. It's a gift that has to be received. That's what He said, I've come that I might give up my life as a gift. If you haven't received it, that's why I brought you this morning. Second thing, and this is for those of us who would call ourselves Christians, followers of Jesus, is even if you have received Jesus' payment and you've said, yes, Lord, you're my King, the question for you and I is, are there ways that we try to approach God with a penny and try to, in a sense, deal with our own guilt? I'm trying to be good because, I've got to work off kind of some bad things that I've been doing or thinking. So I need to get back to church. I hear that a lot. I need to get back to church. I just haven't been living right. Or do you just sit around and you feel guilty and you feel like a failure because of your favorite mistake or just your latest mistake? And Jesus says, look, it's inconsequential to give me a penny of your sadness. Just come and confess it and receive the free gift of forgiveness and go out rejoicing. And guess what? When you live like that, you live better. You live better because you're living out of thankfulness instead of sadness of going, man, God's really disappointed with me again. I got to keep paying it off. And he goes, it's a penny. I've already paid it. Receive it. And for some of you, you beat yourself up and you need to stop doing it. It's not the way to deal with your debt. The way you deal with, Father, forgive me my debts. And I'm going to forgive others. And thank you that they've been paid in full. Let me live in that and live with joy. And by doing that, you break out of the try harder, feel bad, try harder, feel bad, try harder, feel bad, try harder, just give up mode. It's already been paid. Jesus says, live in that. The third and final way to respond to this is to do what Jesus said in this passage we were looking at in Luke chapter 22, where he says, do this in remembrance of me. And he took the bread and he broke it, and he took the cup and he passed it around with the wine in it. Wine is red. It's remembering both his body and the blood that sanctified us and that gave us this new agreement, debt-free situation with God. So what we're going to do is we're going to remember him this morning. We're going to remember him as God. We're going to remember him as the debt payer, the good and wonderful God. If you're not yet a follower of Jesus and you'd say, I'm still kind of searching, that's super cool. We're glad you're here, and this is a good place to be. Nobody's going to push you around. Nobody's going to twist your arm. But we expect that if you hang around with Jesus enough, you'll find him to be the kind of God that you want to stamp your hand. If you haven't come to that place yet in your life, they're going to pass the elements. Just go ahead and leave them. Since it's so representative and so symbolic of what Jesus did, it's a very personal thing for his followers to remember him in that way, because we've received the reality of his body and his blood. So these symbols are just another way to do that. So if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, go ahead and let these little symbols pass, and you can just hang and feel cool as you kind of reflect on all this. So once everybody has one of these each in hand, hold on to it, and we'll just reflect on what Jesus said. It says, on the night that he had his last meal, and he was lounging around the table with all the guys, and at the very end of that he goes, guys, you don't know it, but it's going to be tomorrow. I'm going to give up my body. I'm going to give up my body, but I'm going to give it up for you. Not for me, for you. Because that's why I came. Came in a body. Let's remember he came in a body. Take and eat. Remember Jesus. And he also passed around a cup. It had wine in it. This is simply grape juice. We know some people struggle with addictions, so we just use grape juice here, at least at this point. And he passed it around, and it was red, and he said, this is the new agreement, debt-free living. And it's sealed and commemorated and inspired and began by my blood tomorrow. And so, Jesus, we remember you, and we thank you that you're the God who paid our debts in full through your blood in a new deal. We pray these things with gratefulness, God. In Jesus' name, take and drink. Bye.